Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Discovery Season 2, Episode 13, Such Sweet Sorrow. Now this video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Discovery, so I have to start with a spoiler warning for Discovery up to Season 2, Episode 13. If you haven't seen up to this point, you will not want to watch this episode. Otherwise, some things will be spoiled for you. So, this episode was the penultimate episode of the season. And when I say that, I don't just mean it's the episode before the finale. I mean, this is the penultimate episode of the season. That's how it's written, that's how it plays out, that's how it serves, that's the purpose it serves, that sums up this episode. It's the penultimate episode. This is the episode that sets up for the finale. This is basically part 1 of 2, where it's setting up for the finale. Lost fans, you remember Season 3, the episode Greatest Hit? That was the penultimate episode for Season 3. That was the episode that was setting up for the finale. Deep Space Nine, the episode Dogs of War, that was the penultimate episode of the whole show. That was the episode that was setting up for the finale. So, like another example, say like Voyager, the episode Renaissance Man, that was not a penultimate episode. That just happened to be the episode before the finale. It did nothing to set up for the finale. You see what I'm saying? This episode was the penultimate episode. So that's basically the purpose it serves. So basically it was a setup episode. And as I said, I don't have issues with setup episodes as long as they do their job well, because they serve a purpose in a serialized story, even some that aren't so serialized, of setting up an episode great. And I think penultimate episodes can be amazing. Like Greatest Hits is actually one of my favorite episodes of Lost, and I love Dogs of War, Deep Space Nine as well. So just because it's a setup episode doesn't mean it can't be good or can't be great. And I think this was a very good setup episode. I think it did do its job really well in setting the stakes. I think perhaps a lot better than last week's episode. Last week's episode had been some issues with, particularly that ending. This week's episode, I think, handled it better. So it was a pretty decent episode. A pretty good episode, I shall say. I shall say it did its job of getting me really excited to want to see the finale, because I wasn't before I saw this episode, because the last couple of episodes have been kind of meh to me, kind of mediocre. So I lost my excitement for Season 2, and I wasn't really excited for the finale. But now I am, because I think this episode did its job of getting me excited. Now, I did have a few kind of slight issues here and there. Like, I think it was a bit repetitive how at the start of the episode they, had them. I thought it was pretty cool when they had those, had them do those things to dock with Enterprise, and they had those little corridors that people walk through from one ship to the other. I thought that looked really cool. But then, at the end of the episode, then later they went back to the Discovery, and at the end of the episode, they evacuated Discovery again, and everyone went to the Enterprise again. Felt a bit repetitive. But of course, some people stayed behind to stay with Michael Burnham and her sort of her journey into the future, shall we say. I was kind of hoping that she would go into the future for this episode, and then the finale would deal with the aftermath of that, but it looks like the finale is mostly going to deal with them trying to get to the future. Yeah, we'll see. A lot of interesting information. It turns out that people who say Michael Burnham or thought future Michael Burnham was the Red Angel might not have been wrong after all. Because it might have been, there were 2 Red Angels, possibly, that Michael Burnham's mother may have been responsible for some of the appearances of the Red Angel, but not all of them. Some of them might have been Michael Burnham herself, because we got confirmation earlier that Burnham's mother was not responsible for setting the signals. And now it seems like Burnham was the one who was responsible, but it could be another fake out. Yeah, because they did this to us before. They made us think that Burnham was the Red Angel, and they faked out that it was actually her mother, so that maybe this is another fake out and it's not Burnham at all. Maybe it's someone else. I don't know. But that's what it's looking like at the time being, that and I wouldn't have an issue with that. I said earlier in the season that I would have issues with Burnham being the Red Angel because it wouldn't really make sense. But then, like, certain appearance, like, you know, Red Angel saving Michael Burnham as a child, like, that can be explained away because that was her mother. So if certain appearances didn't make sense, you could just say, oh, well, that wasn't Burnham, that was her mother. But then other appearances that do make sense, you say, oh, that was Burnham. So I'm fine with it, actually. I don't have an issue if that does turn out the case. In fact, I'm kind of wanting it to be the case. I kind of don't really want another fake out. But, I mean, if the fake out's good and makes it even better, then I'll be happy with it, of course, and I'll let it go. But it depends on how good they can do that. So this episode references short tracks. The one, you know, the shorts that appeared before season 2 came out, because it had Tilly's friend Poe, I'm not going to say her full name, reappear. And it seemed kind of like, you know, just a shameless callback. It's like, oh, that's your friend Tilly and whatever. But I didn't actually mind it. I thought it was kind of cool, because I did kind of like the fact, because they set up in the short track that she had this advanced technology, and so the signal led them to her so they could use the advanced technology. I actually thought it was kind of cool how when she came on board the ship, like, she's the queen, so Pike's trying to be all formal, but she's just like, oh, Tilly, and hug. Like, I actually thought that was pretty cool. I have a feeling that some people are going to hate that and complain about it, because there are a lot of Tilly haters out there. I'm not one of them, although I'm not big on Tilly. I don't think she's, like, great, but I tolerate her. I think she's fine. And sometimes I like her, and I liked her here. I thought I actually liked these things. I thought it was pretty cool. And of course we see the Enterprise bridge. I know a lot of people are probably going to complain about that. I don't really care. I'm not that big into set design and stuff. I think it would have been ridiculous. What would have bothered me is if it looked like the exact replica of 1960s, like they did. I mean, I was okay with them doing that in Trials and Tribulations and the Enterprise Mirror Darkly stuff, because those were kind of campy episodes. They were kind of playing it loose. With a serious show like that that's not trying to be campy or playing it loose, it wouldn't fit. And I know some people are going to say, well, they could have done that because they'd done it before, like when Scotty went in the holodeck, but it wouldn't have worked. I'll fight against that to the teeth. I'm really glad that they didn't do that. I would have hated it if they did a nice, like, exact replica of Kirk's bridge. The way they did it, they made it kind of look like it. They made it look more a bit like it, but modernize it, which I think it was actually the best way to go. So I'm actually really happy with what they did. But yeah, overall, I don't have that strong of an opinion on it anyway. It was cool seeing number 1 again, seeing her involved. I actually annoyed me that Admiral Cromwell was there on the Enterprise. I'm like, you go away. I don't really like this character, to be honest. I wish it just had number 1 there, but she didn't appear that much, so I guess it's okay. Yeah, and it was a pretty exciting episode with the stakes where the, you know, armada of Section 31 ships are closing in on them. This time, well, I don't retract my complaint about last week's episode that they could have just used the spore drive to, you know, go to the Delta Quadrant or something where there's no way the AI could find them. And they didn't even consider that option. But in order to stall for time until they get the next signals. So I stand by that, but I was willing to, I didn't let that didn't interfere with my enjoyment for this episode. Because I was they already did that and I just moved past it. Alright, the stakes are contrived and fake, but they're here. And I thought for this episode specifically, the stakes were well earned. It felt like and they were very effective in creating tension and creating suspense and getting me so wrapped up involved in this plan, to create, use the time crystal. I like how they figured out the plan that they came up with is very fascinating. Now, speaking of short treks, this is actually the short trek that had, I think it's called Calypso, which I originally thought was never going to be referenced ever again. Turned out pretty wrong on that. It seems like it's going to play a pretty significant role in the finale, or at least, because I don't know, I don't think we'll see Craft again, like that specific story that we saw in Calypso with Craft and whatever. I think that was kind of just throwaway to set up the fact that there's this AI called Zara that runs Discovery and is waiting for something. I think that is the piece of information I think is going to be important for the finale, because something is going to set it up where we're going to have like Zara and we're going to find out what she was waiting for. So it's interesting. It makes it a lot more fascinating to have this piece of the puzzle, but not know exactly how it's going to fit in. So I applaud that short trek. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Craft will have something to do with it. Maybe that particular story will have bearing. But if I was betting man, I would say it's not. The specific short, the stuff that happened, and it's just irrelevant, self-contained. The only piece of information important is that Discovery's there, thousands of years in the future, and there's an AI called Zara that runs it, and it's waiting for something. That, I think, is the only piece of information that's going to be relevant going forward, but that's just my guess. Anyway, so it did get me thinking a lot when they said they were Burnham was going to take Discovery into the future. Time keeps on slipping into the future. Sorry. So Burnham's going to take Discovery into the future to avoid, because the sphere data won't let itself be destroyed, so it can't even destroy Discovery. So the best way is to hide it in the future, which, makes sense. And when she was going to use the suit, because the suit's in tune to her mother's DNA, and her DNA is the only one that's closest enough to use it. And by the way, I don't have an issue with that. I still have an issue with the whole thing about they're saying we're deadpan certain that without a doubt, 100%, the Red Angel is Michael Burnham. Oh, it's her mother because DNA is Selma. That's still bullshit. That's stupid. But this part, I don't have an issue with. That her DNA is close enough to operate the suit. That's fine. Totally different. Anyway, so she's going to take the Discovery into the future, and then a bunch of other people were like, hey, wait, we're coming with you. Because before they said that, I was kind of thinking that would be setting up for Zara, because that's why Discovery's there. It's empty. Michael Burnham probably goes to a different time period or does something else, so it leaves Discovery empty and is waiting for them. But the introduction of having all these other characters stay behind and go with her, it kind of complicates that theory. Kind of makes it not very viable. But something's got to happen for it to match up. Surely they're not just going to disregard that short. I think that would be quite horrible if they didn't. Don't call me Shirley. Sorry, I just watched Airplane recently. But anyway, yeah, so I'm pretty sure if they did disregard the short entirely, that would suck. But it does, I mean, they're going into the future. That has to take in the future. It seems like things are coming to a head and they're just sort of matching up. But it does make me wonder how they're going to get to that point. Now, the other thought I had is that this would be very interesting. And the fact that Pike left and he was like, they made a big deal. Okay, we got to see who's going to be captain now. I mean, duh, it's Saru. Come on now. If they make Michael Burnham the captain, that would suck. I was about to say rage quit, but I probably wouldn't rage quit, but I wouldn't like it. I would probably rant about it. That would be dumb. Don't make her the captain. And Saru, of course, he's the first officer. He's the highest ranking. Of course he'd be the captain out of everyone else that's already there. I mean, I think it's kind of dumb that they were making a big deal out of it. Oh, we'll figure this out later. But the thing is, the whole thing with Pike leaving, and that was a touching scene, by the way, when they all saluted him I guess that's the way Starfleet salutes people, put their hands behind their back. Seems like a weird way to salute people. But anyway, that was still a touching scene. It showed how good of a Captain Pike was and how much they appreciated him and how awesome their experience was with him. It was a really great contrast between the season 1 and the experience with Lorca, who was a total dickwad. And that whole thing with Georgiou saying, "Oh, I'm from the mirror universe," and Pike's like, "What's the mirror universe?" and winks. Of course, I know some people bitch because he was being transported and you shouldn't be able to move and stuff when you're being transported, but I don't care. Technobabble nonsense. They play with the laws of physics, whatever. It doesn't bother me. But I thought that line was kind of cheesy. I mean, it was interesting because Pike knew all along and he just didn't care. I thought that was kind of cool, but the way Georgiou just said, "Oh, by the way, I'm from the mirror universe," that felt unnatural. It didn't feel like natural dialogue. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, so the thing is, so when Pike left, and it seems like he's going to play out the rest of the season, which is just one episode, on the Enterprise, and so he's done with Discovery. Which, that was an interesting choice, because he could have been like, "Well, I'm staying here too," but I think it makes sense that he needs to go captain the Enterprise. I mean, they have Admiral Cornwell there, but I don't like her, so I think I'm happy with him going over the captain of the Enterprise. But logically, he could have let the Admiral do it, and he could have been like, "Well, I'm coming too," but the fact that he didn't, that he purposely left, makes me think that they're setting up for season 3. So, I had a theory that I'm going to revise. I had this like way back in season 1, like before the final 2 episodes when they mentioned time travel. And I'm going to revise this theory that they are going to take Discovery into the future, and then season 3 will take place in the future. And so that would be a way, because season 2 addressed a lot of the complaints a lot of fans had about Discovery. You could tell it was a lighter tone. They were definitely trying to address a lot of issues people had, and a lot of issues, main issue that a lot of people still have is that this is a prequel that is set before right around the Kirk era, so it makes it very bumping up against continuity, and it just causes a lot of issues when you do a prequel like that. So it makes me think that they are going to correct this by having season 3 take place 1,000 years in the future, even way past, centuries past Next Generation times. Which I don't know, but then all the Picard show and all the stuff set in Next Generation times would have continuity issues bumping up against if this other show set way in the future. But I think that would be, maybe they'll just do it for season 3. Maybe at the end of season 3, like that will be the big journey for season 3. That will be the plot of season 3, them being in the future and having to do this thing in the future, and at the end they come back. I think that would be quite awesome, actually. But there's one hiccup in that theory, is that Spock is one of the people who volunteered to stay behind. And I suppose if Spock could go with them, if it's correct that only season 3 takes place in the future and they come back to the timeline at the end of season 3, they can still do that with Spock as long as Spock comes back like 10 years at the same time period. Like, so he's still there to join the Enterprise and do his Kirk storyline. That could work. But if Discovery was going to stay in that distant future and never come back, then Spock's presence there is a hiccup. So I think perhaps something may happen that Spock is going to have to do something. He's going to have to leave the ship and go back to the Enterprise before they actually go. Something's going to happen, and Spock's like, "I have to go," and he leaves the ship for some reason. Or maybe he does get in the future with them, but he has to, I have to do this, and he has to travel back to the time and leave the Discovery people behind. I really hope this theory is right. I think it would be cool as fuck if season 3 takes place in the distant future, the entire season. But if Spock remains on the ship, it doesn't mean they can't do it. As I said, they could still just have them go in the distant future for season 3, but then have them come back by the end of season 3, so that Spock is still back in the right time so he can still do his Kirk storyline. I know if they did do that, though, I bet you a lot of people were like, oh, this is breaking canon, Spock can't be in the future, oh, and not even think about the possibility that, hey, they're probably going to get Spock back into his right time eventually, so it will match up eventually. It's like the whole thing with the Spore Drive. People are ripping their hair out about how it doesn't match up, but I'm still confident that they'll come up with a proper reason to explain why it was never mentioned in the future. You just have to wait for it and trust and trust that they'll do it, because, and even if you don't trust them, you still don't know yet that it's not going to be inconsistent. You don't know what they're going to do. They're probably going to come up with a good explanation as to why it doesn't work. Anyway, yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say about this episode. It was, as I said, it was mostly just a setup episode. It was dialogue heavy. I guess, like, we got the goodbye between Tyler and Burnham, which I was really on board with the relationship in Season 1. This is the one thing I think Season 2 didn't do as well as Season 1, is their relationship. I kind of don't buy it as much anymore, or don't care about it as much anymore, I should say. I buy it, I just not invested anymore. Maybe that's me. And it does, I did get this feeling. Now, I heard someone else, a lot of people actually talk about this with Discovery, is that a lot of times they have a lot of scenes that are very emotional, like they have emotional music and the characters are crying and they're saying goodbyes, and it's not quite earned. Like, they didn't quite earn these emotional moments. Now, with this episode, I wouldn't say that's the case. It's a slight feeling, though. It's a slight, like, hint of a feeling that maybe the emotional beats and the emotional moments in the scene were not, just slightly not as earned as they could have been, or that they're playing them out to be. Again, it's just a slight thing. I didn't get as choked up while watching this episode as I did some other episodes. So I do think they were, and I do think that's an issue with the show overall. I do think that they often, and not just emotional beats, but maybe action beats as well, they often assume the audience has a stronger connection with the characters than what was actually earned. So that's something I think that does need to be addressed in Season 3, and that's probably a result of all the behind-the-scenes issues. But yeah, I think there's a lot of overall. And there's still one episode left, but overall, I'm going to say Season 2 is a good season. Definitely better than Season 1, but it has a lot of flaws, and I'm confident, though. I'm not these people, Discovery's always going to suck. I'm confident that they'll smooth out these issues. And I keep comparing it to, like, the first two seasons of Next Gen Enterprise Deep Space Nine, how those are subpar. And there's a lot of pushback against that, and I'm going to push back against that pushback. I think that pushback is totally wrong. I think that's pretty much a very fair comparison, especially because most of those issues, particularly the Next Generation, I would say Enterprise as well, because Rick Berman was throwing his weight around, and maybe even Deep Space Nine, because they haven't got the set showrunners yet. Ronald D. Moore and Howard Stephen Barrett didn't come on the first two seasons. So yeah, pretty much all those shows that had issues with the first two seasons was because of behind-the-scenes issues, and it's because of shuffling of writers, there's shuffling of showrunners, and there was a lot of behind-the-scenes shit going on, and that's exactly the same thing here with Discovery. So I think that comparison is 100% fair. I mean, it's not like one-to-one comparison, of course, but it's a very fair comparison. And I will push back against anyone who pushbacks against that. I think you're wrong. My opinion. Anyway, that is it. Oh yeah, first, my rating. Sorry, my rating for Such Sweet Sorrow out of 10 is a 9 excellent. As I said, a very good setup. I was very invested. Maybe tinge not as much invested as I could have been, but I was still very invested. I thought it was very suspenseful. I thought it was a very interesting setup. It's got me really, really excited to see the finale, which is what this episode's supposed to do, so it 100% did its job correctly. So that is it for my review of Star Trek Discovery Season 2, Episode or 13, sorry, and I will be back here next week to review the big finale, so be sure to check that out. Also check out my channel as I review many other shows like Game of Thrones, Lost, The Expanse, and more, so be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching. Oh yeah, I forgot to address this theory that control is the Borg. I've been hearing a lot about it, specifically recently. Everyone's saying that. Some's just saying it's like a foregone conclusion that this is definitely origins of the Borg. Well, I didn't address it because I don't really think much of this theory, to be honest. Before I was saying I really hope it's not the case, but now I'm going to also add to that I think it's not the case. It's not the case. The control's not the Borg. That would make no sense. That's not what Discovery's doing. It's not going to happen. Positive thoughts. My God, would that suck if it happens? But it's not going to happen, so don't worry about it. I don't really care, so that's why I'm not going to talk about it anymore, because it doesn't matter, because that's not the case.